Walls have been a core element of Clash of Clans since the game's release, yet they've also become one of its most controversial features over the years. Numerous counters and strategies have been introduced, and as walls remained among the most expensive upgrades in the game, their relevance has been called into question. Today we'll dive into everything you need to know about walls, why so many players choose to skip these costly upgrades, and whether they still make a meaningful impact on gameplay in 2025. Will wall costs continue to skyrocket in the future, or will Supercell introduce changes to rebalance them? Let's dive right into it. There are many underwhelming defenses in Clash of Clans. Take the mortar for instance, that can't even hit its target, or even the cannons, which deal only slight damage to ground troops and are frequently used merely as tanking towers by suing them to protect other defensive structures. At least the cannons have a merged version that's incredibly helpful against pets when attacking alongside heroes. Meanwhile, walls just stand by watching the attack unfold, either being brutally demolished or simply remaining in place as the enemy effortlessly 3-stars the base. Over the years, countless strategies and counters have emerged, leaving walls with little to no chance against most assaults, and while that might not seem like a major issue, after all they look good and can subtly influence troop pathing in key moments, there's one huge drawback: they're incredibly expensive. Their cost can reach up to 8 million gold per piece, which means that upgrading all walls from level 17 to level 18 costs around 2.6 billion gold. Furthermore, to completely max out your walls, you'll need nearly 31 million per piece in total. That comes to over 10 billion gold elixir for a fully maxed wall setup. To put this in perspective, maxing out your entire village currently requires approximately 4.7 billion gold and around 3.4 billion elixir, so you end up spending more than half of your earned resources on walls over the course of your play time. If you assume a typical loot of 1 million gold and 1 million elixir per attack, which isn't very common, it would take roughly 9,772 attacks to gather enough loot to max out your village, and over 5,000 attacks at 1 million per attack would be required just to max out your walls. Now, if we assume a player can attack 500 times a month, a generous estimate, as many players attack less frequently. Even though rune values and variable loot can help, it would take around 10 months of grinding solely to max out the walls. Of course, there are events and strategies that can speed up this process. Buying the gold pass, for instance, provides a 20% discount, and special events like the anime season or hammer jam reduce costs. You might also receive some gold runes and wall rings to help along the way. Still, if you want to max out all your walls without playing smart, it will take months of dedicated effort, but honestly that's not such a huge problem. You're still progressing. Even though you may never fully max out your walls, you'll still have a solid base, and for a free-to-play player the sense of not reaching complete max level is far from critical. The real issue is that the overall value of the walls is just incredibly low. Back in the early 2014 SS, walls were extremely important both in terms of their cost and their level. In those early stages, the base was so small that wall placement could be crucial for defense. With fewer strong counters and limited unit numbers, a well-structured base with strategically placed walls added tremendous defensive value, making base designing crucial in defending your base as well as your loot. At Town Hall 1, walls didn't even exist yet, but when they were introduced at Town Hall 2, they quickly became a key component of every base. Although they couldn't cover the entire base, they forced enemy troops to detour, potentially slowing down attacks. Even when wall breakers, the first counter to walls, appeared in Town Hall 3, they weren't as overpowered as they are today. Walls still played one of the biggest roles in the game at that time, although there was a significant in-game shortcut. Many players might not recall this, but at Town Hall 3 you could rebuild your clan castle, which enabled you to join a clan and request just a single balloon. With that one high-level balloon in the clan castle, you could place the CC down and watch as the balloon completely delete the small base from the sky, a strategy that remains unpatched to this day. In that sense, walls didn't always offer huge value, however, because not many players knew about this tactic, and because you could only use it every 10 minutes, their importance was still appreciated. When air troops and hog riders were introduced, these units largely ignored walls. However, at that time air units weren't particularly strong and hog riders didn't have enough hit points to survive against a max town hall. This is why these strategies required other troops to support them. With the later release of golems and the barbarian king at Town Hall 8, walls once again became a significant part of the game. Tanks were slow, they couldn't simply break through a wall and had to rely on wall breakers and, more crucially, jump spells. By using jump spells exclusively for tanks, you essentially sacrificed a rage spell, thereby reducing your army's overall power and making it easier for the base to clear the attacking troops. Additionally, you couldn't take as many spells into battle as nowadays, and base designs prevented players from bypassing large portions of the base with a single jump spell. As a result, troops were sometimes forced to stop to destroy a wall, giving defensive units a chance to eliminate the attackers. While walls still had a fighting chance even with numerous counters in place, their overall value value became increasingly questionable as time went on. By the time Town Hall 12 was released, several effective counters to walls were already in place, such as wall breakers, air troops like balloons, dragons, minions, baby dragons, and lava hounds that completely ignored walls, the earthquake spell, hog riders who bypassed walls by jumping over them, and miners capable of digging under them. However, Town Hall 12, another major counter was introduced. Siege machine. Previously, reaching the center of a base was quite challenging, but siege machines made it possible. Well-defended areas could be breached by deploying clan castle troops via a blimp, or walls could be demolished by the wall wrecker, though hardly anyone uses it anymore. The log launcher or the stone slammer. In later updates, even the lava launcher could break walls with ease, though walls managed to hold it back, unlike the persistent battle drill, which completely ignored the existence of walls. Once again, after Town Hall 12, the overall landscape didn't change drastically. Stronger defenses and additional wall amounts were added. With that, many walls and defenses around Town Halls 13 and 14 base designs shifted towards spreading structures across a larger area, preventing a single powerful unit from dealing devastating damage in one attack. In this context, walls regained significance as designers used them to funnel enemy troops by dividing the base into compartments rather than relying on the older ring-based layouts centered around a core. During that period, Queen Walk strategy skyrocketed in popularity as walls did little to impede the Queen's progress. With just a few wall breakers, she could penetrate deep into the base. Nevertheless, mastering Queen charges was no easy task, and mass spam strategies often failed because of the expansive base layouts. By the time Town Hall 15 was released, the game reached a more balanced state in which both air and ground troops were viable, with the Electro Titan emerging as a meta unit. Walls became even more valuable. They slowed down mass Titan attacks, even though prior to its nerfs Electro Titans could literally demolish bases. After the adjustments, Town Hall 15 arguably became one of the toughest levels to master, and walls became one of the most important elements of the base. But then Supercell struck again, and this time crushed everything to the grounds. With the Town Hall 16 update, Supercell introduced such powerful units that not only walls but the entire base could no longer stand a chance. The addition of new equipment and, more importantly, the introduction of root riders completely rewrote how walls function in the game, leaving their very purpose up for debate. Although, as mentioned earlier, walls still offer some value against certain attacking strategies. For example, against ground-based assaults, the meta has shifted toward units and tactics that effectively counter walls. Some base designs still present an insane challenge to armies that ignore walls thanks to their own disadvantages. However, if an attacker isn't using even a single counter to wall, it only takes one piece to break for them to enter a compartment of a base. Given the steep cost of each wall, it often feels pointless to stress over them, even though they look impressive and might psychologically convince an attacker that the base is stronger. As bases have grown larger and attackers can bring more firepower to the battle, a single wall simply cannot hold its ground. Consider the builder base. When the base is much smaller and players can only bring a limited number of troops, a single wall makes a lot more sense. Just as in the earlier days, every element of the base had significant impact throughout the game's history. There have been several effective counter strategies to walls, such as the Old Miner plus healing spell combo, Golem plus jump boost, Lavaloon, Super Archer, Blimp, and more recently the Root Rider and Mass Dragon strategies. All the times, careful wall placement made a significant difference, preventing attackers from mass spamming their units in one spot and then randomly deploying spells. However, the influence of walls on these strategies, especially those relying on air units, has steadily diminished as players could bring more and more forces to battle. Players gained increased troop capacity and a wider variety of unit combinations, allowing them to bypass walls more effectively while minimizing losses to the base's defenses. So is it worth upgrading your walls? Definitely. Even though the high cost and grinding can be challenging, there are several key reasons why you shouldn't let your walls fall behind. I recommend keeping your walls consistently about 2 levels behind your current max level. At that point, they still provide solid hit points without costing you twice as much for only a marginal increase in strength. For instance, when you deploy a ground unit like the Barbarian King, a wall separating him from an opposing hero might distract him by forcing him to attack the wall. Similarly, if only a few ground troops remain in an attack and defending units are out of reach, the enemy may be forced to spend valuable time breaking through walls, potentially leading to a time failure. If your walls don't have enough hit points due to their low level, you just make the attacker have an easier job. There are also situations where walls prove essential. For example, when you send in a blimp carrying super archers into the middle of your base, the archers can be held back by walls that block their path. And of course, there's the aesthetic appeal. High-level walls look fantastic, giving your base a complete and formidable appearance. Overall, walls have repeatedly come through in critical situations, and they should never be left out from the game, even if a rework is possible in the future. Consider how builder huts evolved from mere hit point structures to units that help defend the base and heal defensive towers. With so many walls present right now, and with Supercell planning to make make the home village smaller through merges, walls might thrive once more, so it's definitely worth it to keep them up to date. However, if Supercell fails to rework and balance walls, they risk frustrating players who may feel discouraged by the excessive grind required to max them. Without meaningful improvements, walls could become more of a burden than a strategic element. For now, however, their steep cost remains a constant challenge, serving primarily as a symbol of progress in the final hustle at each town hall level. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Clash of Clans' most controversial features, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future content. Stay tuned for more updates, strategies, and discussions on how Clash of Clans continues to evolve. See you in the next one.